Hi, this is Dr. Mike, and I wanted to take just a few moments tonight to talk to you about this week's work. You've done a good job, and I have worked on grading your papers with the discussion of the Byzantines and Rome. And I wanted to just kind of fill in a few of the gaps that I feel like may be a little bit missing in your timeline so that you could better understand. Chronologically, the best way to write history, of course, is by time. And so it's very difficult to do that sometimes with different rulers and Caesars. And so there was a little bit of discussion that I noted regarding Charlemagne and Constantine and Justinian. And then you wanted to incorporate Paul into some of your biblical perspective. So I want to just take a few moments to kind of give you a rough run through of the Roman history and its importance. We know the Roman Empire was, of course, in vogue when Christ was crucified. Tiberius Caesar was on the throne. By the time Paul gets there, it is Nero. And we're still very early. Constantine does not come to the Roman throne until about 325 or a little bit before that. His conversion is questionable. And I say that lightly because of what I know from history. But he's about to go into a major battle. And the night before, he dreams a dream. And in that dream, he sees a cross. And of course, being a Roman, he is not up to date on Christian religions. It's not even a major religion at that point. This is 300. This is 200 years after the death of Christ. And so he asked his attendants the question, what does this cross mean? And they said, that's the sign of the Christians. In his dream, it says, in this sign you will conquer. And so he is quite interested in winning the battle. And so he will accept that as the basis of his battle. He wins the battle. And that leads to what we would normally call Constantine's conversion. And I will say a bit more about that in a moment. But it did end the persecution of Christians in about 325 AD. So that is a positive thing. His mother, Queen Helena, goes to Jerusalem and finds many of the sites, biblical sites, and she will build a church over them, what we would call a Catholic church. If you visited there today, there's always a Catholic church on top of a site like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. And we as Christians sometimes can be critical of that, not realizing that this really was a great thing in that it preserved the site. The site did not get lost to history. And so for many of those sites, we can count on them being the actual sites where things happened in the Bible. And so that's a positive thing. As to the conversion aspect, you realize that Constantine added Jesus as God to a list of the pantheon of Roman gods, and that was not a major deal to him. He did not get baptized into the faith until at the very end of his life. And so I'm not here to pass judgment. I'm just here to say there are several things that are understood that doesn't quite meet the litmus test of what we would consider to be Christian conversion, although it did lift the persecution of Christians, and it became one of his gods, probably among many other Roman gods. In 391, Theodosius, the Roman emperor that follows him, will declare Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire. They will get rid of their pantheon of gods, and Jesus will be the only God that the Romans worship. In 487, which is not even 100 years after that, the Rome in the West will fall, and many of the pagan Romans will be upset and blame it on Christianity. And they said, we survived for centuries with our gods, and we did not have this problem, and now we adopt this new religion, and suddenly we're no more. So there's a lot of angst about that. When when Theodosius declared this to be the only God of the Roman Empire, they wanted to get the pagans to come to church. And it was at that point in time that they will connect many of the pagan holidays with Christian events so that the pagans would at least come to church. For instance, December the 25th, Christmas probably was not the birth time of Jesus. because you do not find shepherds in the field in December in the Holy Land. Much more like March or April would be much more likely understanding of that. But it was a pagan holiday, Saturnalia, in which the pagans, so they used a pagan holiday, made it Christmas. Halloween will be another one of those. October the 31st, All Hallows Eve became All Saints Eve in the church. And so Halloween became actually a Christian holiday. Easter is a valid holiday because it's tied to the Jewish Passover, of course, and Jesus becoming the Lamb of God to take away the sins of the world. So basically, the merging of old Roman paganism and Christianity did take place around 391 or so, and you do have that. Let's talk about the Byzantines. By Constantine's rule in 325, we've talked a little bit about how unwieldy the Roman Empire had become. It had become so large that it could not be administered well. It became so large that an army was stretched to protect all of its borders. And so during Constantine's reign, they divide it into the east and the west. They're coming under increased pressure in 300 from the Germanic tribes and the Visigoths and the Vandals and the Huns. All of these barbarians, if you will, along the northern borders are pushing the Roman army pretty heavily. Their boundaries extend all the way to Great Britain. They build Adrian's Wall to try to keep out the Angles and the Jutes. And so they are really stretched. We talked, I think, before about the fact that they allowed non-Romans into the army. Many of the barbarians that they had captured and civilized, they offered them Roman citizenship and a place in the Roman army, which was good and bad. And on the bad side, they had people now in the army that were not Roman, did not know what it meant to be a Roman. And we've talked about that in light of the Apostle Paul and how important his Roman citizenship was to his protection and his ability to function. And so his ability to appeal to the Caesar and to go all the way to Nero and present his case before him. He had that right as a Roman citizen. But allowing barbarians to become citizens and people that did not value freedom and did not value the things that they had as Rome, they didn't know what Rome was all about. And so it's going to greatly weaken the empire. So Constantine divides the empire into the east and the west. In the west, Rome is still the capital. The Pope is still the head of the church, or will be by 5th century, the head of the church. And Latin will still be the language of communication within religion. In the east, Constantinople, which is a beautiful city, will become the head of the Eastern Empire, the Roman Empire. After 1056, the church is also going to divide in the Great Schism. And that's something that I think many of you are missing in your thinking here. 1056, there is now another church at Constantinople with its own pope, and these become the Orthodox churches. Today, if you go to Russia, it's Russian Orthodox, it's Syrian Orthodox, it's Greek Orthodox, and you might be familiar with Greek Orthodox in your town because there are many of those in this country. Sometimes you'll see a Syrian, sometimes you'll see Russian in places like Brighton Beach, New York, or wherever. But the church will divide in 1056 in the Great Schism. And they are being pressured. The church in the east is pressured by the Muslims and by Genghis Khan, who we talked about, and these vast armies that are approaching from the east, moving west, trying to overtake these other kingdoms. And so they request of the Pope at Rome that he would send help in the form of people to fight back and to take back. And this is how they sold the war. It wasn't so much about taking back the Holy Land from the infidel as it was to push back these hordes that are coming, like Genghis Khan and others, that are pushing to the west. And so the Great Crusades that started in about 1050 or so, there'll be 5 of those, are sending people to fight back and push back against these. So there's a lot of time involved here. Charlemagne, who many of you wrote upon, or several of you wrote about, was in 800. So he's right in the middle between the fall of Rome in 476 or so. Within 200 years, literacy has disappeared in the West, and we have gone into the Dark Ages. We owe the Muslims a great debt of gratitude in that they preserved much of our Western history, Greek philosophy, the Greek language, all these things. They translated that into Arabic. They kept it alive for us, and then we got it back from them after 1200 when we went into the Renaissance. The Eastern Church became the Orthodox Church. Their language of medium will be Greek, and they will be a different, where the Roman Church in Rome, Latin is the medium, Greek is the medium that they will use there. And so that's very important for you to kind of distinguish between the two. After 1056, they'll kind of go in their separate directions. They have never been able to reconcile, come back together to be a united church again. And so this, when we say Catholic Church, of course, the Catholic Church has evolved and changed through the years up until the great, the Reformation in 1500s, when the Protestants will leave the Catholic Church and will become a separate entity again. So there's been several big splits in that history that are worth talking about. And of course, we will as we move through Western civilization. Justinian will come after Constantine. He's the great lawgiver. He will be much more Byzantine than Constantine was. Byzantine understanding will be centered around Constantinople. There will be a different building style. They will build like that we talk about the church that many of you mentioned in Constantinople that was built there, that's still there. Will be a very different architectural style than what was built in Rome, where we had Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. All these great artisans in the years to come are going to enhance the Roman church. They will also have many great architects and painters and things in the Eastern Church that will do the same thing. 1990, I was privileged to be in Russia and travel through many of the Orthodox churches. And of course, you distinguish those by the kind of onion-shaped domes on the top. Those would be Orthodox churches. You can always tell what kind of religious building something is. Most Protestant churches will have a steeple and a cross. Most Orthodox churches will have these onion-shaped domes. If you remember, in Moscow, in Lenin Square, there's a beautiful Church of St. Basil's there that has beautiful colored domes like that. A Muslim church will have the little minaret towers where the call to prayer is given each day. So as you look at these different religions, you will see a lot of differences in the building structures that go along with that. So I hope this kind of clarifies for you some of the things that we have been talking about. It's important that we understand these little nuances, and I note those in your stories because I want you to get the story right, the chronology right, get people in their right places and time. So tell your story chronologically. In this case, if you want to talk about Paul, start with Paul in the early days. He's with Nero, the Caesar, and then 325 Constantine is the Roman emperor, and Justinian comes after that, and then the Crusades, of course, in the Byzantine era. You just need to kind of shift it down a little bit in your thinking, much more toward the post 1056 Great Schism era, and you can it's beginning to change as early as Constantine when he divides the kingdom, but let's associate that more with Constantinople, more with the Greek language, and more with the understanding of that concept than trying to tie the Western church with that. So hopefully that gives you some perspective and will help you to understand more of what we're talking about. And I look forward to talking to you in the live chat. Thank you.